Two.
All right, hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of the forecast contest discussion. I'm going to start off looking at the most recent verification. Forecast was made May 18th. Target window was June 2nd to June 6th. So let's see how everyone did, sort by CRPS. Looks like this week our verification was 41.8 CDDs, which was pretty decent for most people. Had Dave Darkangelo was our best human forecaster, followed reasonably closely by yours truly. Maxar, that's a 10-year. Still gonna take me a while to get used to those names. Dave did pretty well this week. Matt Rogers, Industry, etc. So we'll go take a look at the Dynacast for that particular week. You can see it was pretty warm overall everywhere except for Texas, which is a fairly interesting pattern. So I'm going to take a look at the 500 millibar, which I think I have to zoom out for. Let's see Northern Hemisphere. 500 millibar height departures. Take a look at that. I don't like that one. Let's try North America. Okay, that's a little better. So yeah, very interesting pattern. Double ridge, one over the west coast, one over the east coast, and then a nice trough sitting right over Texas. So not if anyone wrote that down in their bingo card, congratulations, you win this week. Let's take a look at a couple of the top performers forecast maps to see if they did reasonably well. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit more blue in Dave Darkangelo's forecast than what reality was, but overall, I'd say this is decent, close enough. Pretty hard to be 100% accurate from that far out, of course. So I'd say I'd give that a check. Mine is not what I would call. I got the West Coast right, the East Coast not so much, and also it seems both of us missed the Texas cool, which I think is interesting considering we were the top two, Dave Darkangelo and myself, and we both missed the Texas cold. Let's take a look now at the EC and the CFS. Let's do Northern Hemisphere, and we'll do global. Yeah, we'll do global. Global looks better. So looking at the global patterns, and I'll switch that on Dynacast so it reflects that global. So looking at these three, so it looks like the CFS was kind of close. Not really on the West Coast. I don't really think that was. Yeah, there's a ridge where the trough was on the West Coast, but the East Coast, I think that's okay. If someone wants to disagree with that, they can, but I think that's reasonably close enough. The orientation's a little off, but there is a ridge there. Missed completely with Texas and had a trough off the West Coast, which was moved a little bit. So it looks like it just kind of, if you change the orientation a little bit, move everything southeast by several hundred miles or so, maybe 1,000 miles, I don't know. It might have done a little bit better, but overall, I'd say handled the East Coast okay and West Coast not so much. EC, not very much blue on the map for me to work with, but I can kind of give it something. It had the West Coast ridge. It's a little offshore instead of directly overhead, but it was close. Again, close but no cigar. And the East Coast ridge, again, close but a little too far to the north. Overall, though, it might not be too hard to imagine there could have been something going on in Texas, especially between the two ridges. It looks like it might have tried, but didn't quite get there on its departures. So I'll open it up. Any thoughts from anyone on this particular forecast?
I guess on my end, I just it's just been interesting seeing the things bouncing, the variability, in the forecast, right? Because it was the week before. What was the week before again? The verification.
Let's see. So, I can just go
That
back
was
one.
that was the pretty chilly week, right? Yeah, 20.
Yeah, 23.
Yeah, 23.8. And then I think you don't have to go back further, but like we had a week or two before that, which was I think pretty high. It's just
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about this over the last couple of weeks, or even last week, I think with Dave D'Arcangelo a little bit too. And is this? I think it keeps the question is, yeah. We talked about it with Dr. Lupo too. Now that I think about it, I think I asked Dr. Lupo the same question. What does this mean for the rest of the summer? And I guess the question is what we're seeing now, some of this heat, higher CDDs. Is this the signature for the rest of the summer, or is it more the variability over the last month? I think the consensus was don't put too much weight on the variability in May. So we'll see.
Yeah, on that point, I was reading from someone. He's a pretty reliable meteorologist on Twitter. Goes by, I think his name is Steve DiMartino. And he was saying that in his summer forecast that he thinks the overall pattern will be cool, at least in the Northeast, followed by these obliteratingly hot periods, and then we go back down to cooler again. So far he seems to be right, but the summer's got a couple of months yet to go. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not.
Yeah, I was looking at this forecast and it almost looks like a persistence forecast for us. And now I'm remembering that that I think Joe did a persistence forecast because it looks identical to our May 11th forecast. I was looking at that number and saying, I don't remember issuing a number so low. So this one, I don't have any insight into what Joe is doing other than persistence. I had a personal issue that I couldn't be there for the discussion on Sunday and Monday that we normally do before our forecast. So, but yeah, 41.8 was a heck of a, that was well above the 10-year and the 30-year.
Yeah, where did that rank again, Michael?
A 41.
Yeah, like we know, was it like a top 5?
How do I get that info?
So you can go to yeah, you're on the right page, right? So build a map, I guess.
Maybe I should do.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, and go to Cone for region. You might have to be on CONUS. It's pretty sensitive to this stuff. Yeah, exactly. And then if you have the right dates in there, I think you do, right? Yeah, there you go. Bingo. WDD. Yep.
So it looks like this.
Oh, you're on gas. You're on gas. So go to where it says waiting scheme, pop CDDs, population CDDs. Bingo. All right. So number 3.
Yeah.
That's the third highest in the. Is that in the 30 or the?
This is since 1950.
Wow.
So yeah, it's 72 years. It looks like it's got. So now it's it is just that 5-day period. So there's going to be a lot of variability from 5-day period.
Right. But still, that's pretty impressive.
It is.
I think it's also worth noting that our number one was last year, June 6th to 2nd to 6th. So pays to have to keep that in mind, that we seem to be getting warmer every year when making your forecast. Because if you look, you can see 3, 4, 5, 5 in the last 10 years. Actually, the top 6 or 7, yeah, 6 forecasts have all been in the top 15 years. So with more, if you keep, you can look at the top
Right.
12, the only ones that aren't since the year 2000 are the 1981 and the 1960. So always helps to keep in mind that, we're steadily increasing from the 10-year, even the new 10-year and the new 30-year normal due to global warming. So helpful to keep that in mind for the forecasts that we make. It's just an aside. Let's go back to this. I think it's also, I mentioned earlier, I think it's interesting that despite Texas being, looks like 8 or so degrees below average, including, I believe, Dallas is either close to or in the middle of this. I'm not too familiar with Texas geography. But it's interesting that the South was so cold overall, and it didn't really affect the CDD numbers. In fact, it was almost a record.
Yeah, Dallas, look, I think Dallas would be almost right on the edge of that gradient between the really pink. Yeah, right about there.
Yeah, in that area. Still, of course, New Jersey was not as warm as the surrounding areas, so that figures. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look at one more person's forecast. Let's see how you did that.
Michael, I was just going to say the only other point to that is like, it's amazing how high our CDDs were without the help of Texas. I mean, so we were third all time. I mean, am I missing something, right? Third all time for this
Yep.
period, despite the fact that Texas was cool.
That's in spite of the cool
Yeah.
Texas,
Yeah.
where you'd expect it to be warm.
I think
Yeah.
that, to me, I mean, one way to look at it, I guess there's a couple, but one way to look at it is, I know, Dave D'Arcangelo over the last couple of weeks has mentioned some caution, saying, hey, maybe there'll be a cap on the summer because of Texas. Well, maybe, but I think the other way to look at it is, geez, if we can do that, number 3 for a 5-day period with Texas being well below normal in temperatures, well, then maybe we could have a summer that's still top 5, despite Texas, doing much, even if Texas is a little bit below normal, or maybe even normal, if the rest of the country is boiling.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd have to check the numbers for the nation, but when you look at the top summers here in the Missouri and surrounding areas, the top 7 stand out. In other words, the gap between 7 and 8 is more than a full degree, and it's that's just an amazing statistical oddity about our summers out here.
So wait, I'm sorry, say that one more time. Like the
Yeah, if you look at the top 10 summers,
okay,
the top 10 hottest summers out here, the first 7 stand alone, and then you've got a gap between number 7 and number 8 that's a little more than 1 degree Fahrenheit.
I see.
In the average.
I see.
And,
yeah, that's interesting.
So the top 7 are truly outstanding here.
Is there any obvious or clear, like, physical explanation for that, or?
The only explanation I have for it is those are very dry summers as well. And so it could be that, just the lack of moisture to tamp down the temperatures, because a lot of those summers are 1980, 1936, all the famous drought years.
Got it.
well, I might as well take a look at precip as well. Might as well see if there's any. Well, it looks like California droughts, that's no surprises there. Texas was that's a little less wet than I would have expected. Especially with the temperature departure, I would have expected a little bit more precip, but maybe that's normal for them. I'm not too familiar with Texas precipitation in early June, so no real clues to with the precipitation.
Well, just Michael, just to be clear here, this is departure from normal.
Yeah, I know. I was expecting, with the precip to kind of match the temperature departure
Right.
map a little closer, but it was kind of because I was kind of expecting the main slug of precip to be in Texas and be a little bit closer, and well, with some precip in Louisiana as well, but the central Texas didn't really have all that impressive departure from normal with precipitation. It was there, but it didn't really match up the way I was expecting it to, essentially, especially with if I can
Yeah,
find.
no, that's good. I just, when you said something about it maybe
Yeah,
being normally, that it just sounded a little weird. But I think the other thing, I mean, we don't have to do this now, but that could explain some of that is a lot of cloud cover and potentially, I wasn't following it too closely, but like a high pressure with a lot more easterly winds, like cutting into northern Texas, Oklahoma, places like that for a day or two. It could have just been one days where the temperatures were really suppressed because the clouds or northeast winds and
Yeah.
things like that really ate into those areas. That'd be my guess without having looked at it in great detail.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there was plenty of high pressure to go around. Looks like could have resulted in an east wind. Just one last thing I want to look at, unless someone has something. What was I going to? Oh, yeah. This one. So it's just another thing to kind of add here into how warm this period could have truly been. Even if you take off the Texas warmth, that probably adds probably on average 6 or so CDDs based on just kind of guesstimating on this map here. And just throw that into normal, we would wind up somewhere very close to the #1 rank, which based on our highest human forecaster was Dave Darkangelo, and our highest forecast overall was the 5-year moving average. So if that had verified that way, with Texas not being cold, our closest forecast would have still been 10 CDDs off. So I think that's interesting that not only would have our 5-year moving average, which kind of takes into account some of the global warming, but even our normals would have been just so far off. Almost would have been, actually that would have been 50% higher than the 30-year. So I think that's just kind of attests to how warm this period really was without Texas.
Yeah.
In spite of Texas, I should say. All right, so if we don't have anything else to add, I can move on to the current forecast. All right, well, we can always go back if somebody thinks of something. So take a look at this one. Looks like we have a pretty decent spread here. Looks like we're steadily getting warmer. We have persistence 5-day, once again, our highest forecast, with trend also very high, and I'm not too far behind. EC in the 10-year are pretty much the same forecast. Dave also at 50 in year moving average. Industry, Dr. Decker just kind of runs down the list. CFS seems to have gotten back to its mid-season form, having the coldest forecast as usual. Can take a look at, let's take a look at the temperature map. close some of these other ones out. And let's take a look also at the global, and then we'll do the same for the EC, just for the fun of it. Let's put these next to it. Okay, so it's pretty clear differences right off the bat on the temperature from the EC and the CFS. Looks like the CFS is expecting some coolness in the central part of the country, kind of snaking oddly into the northeast, with a warm west coast and a warm southeast. Very warm on Hudson Bay as well for some reason. And then the EC is expecting a fairly broad northern tier of the country with, again, some Texas cool. So we'll see if that ends up being a factor, since I don't know if, let's actually push this ahead. Let's do 7th to 12 just to see if, no, it looks like they're not expecting the Texas cool to continue. So
Yeah.
be interesting to see if it comes back and we just kind of end up in a repeat of a Texas switching between warmer and cooler. For what it's worth, a sneak peek into my forecast, if I can find it, the CPC still seems to indicate that they think it'll be cool in the south. So not sure if that'll be the case or not, but they do expect some precip in that area as well. So we'll see. Let's take a look quickly at the 500 and then I'll open up the floor. Looks like a very similar pattern to what we just saw from the EC and actually the CFS as well. Ridge off the east and west coast. This actually, I'm gonna go back because I think that ridge is actually exactly the same. Oddly enough, pretty much exactly. Well, not exactly, but that's pretty close. So the EC is expecting some small changes here in, I guess, 3 weeks removed. Yeah, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from our last the last verification. So that's it's an interesting little tidbit. Looking quickly at the CFS, a lot of ridging along the west coast, Alaska, Bering Straits, I think that is, if I recall properly. Big ridge off over the east coast with a little bit of frothiness in the central part. Spatially, it makes sense, I think. You ridge, trough, ridge. Not sure if that'll be right, but again, similar to the EC, a little bit more frothiness in the middle part of the country. So we'll end up seeing how that looks. Anyone want to share their forecast and or give any thoughts about anything?
I guess I can talk about my forecast a little bit. I think the bottom line for me is I used a similar weighting formula from previous weeks, and I didn't have. I think the overriding signals for me, I think for most of the summer, are to kind of go with the trend signals, and short term, kind of kind of try to use the normals that are adjusted for this shorter term climate period with the warming and such. I don't again, all the discussions we've had the last couple of weeks about May and what it means and synoptics and stuff like that. I think that predicting these synoptics are really difficult, and I think unless there's like a really strong signal, and I didn't get that from looking whether it's ENSO or MJO or some other feature out there. Sometimes I look at like cold pools in Canada or something like that might give a hint. I think for me, the bottom line was the best bet was to try to weight as best possible some weighting scheme that captures the trend of the climate, and that's going to be the best predictor for this period. So that's what I came up with. It's not very sexy, I guess, but my gut feeling beyond that, my gut feeling is kind of some of the things that Dr. Lupo and Dave have said over the past couple of weeks, that by hook or by crook, when we look back at this summer in September or October, I suspect it will fit in like a lot of these other summers, that from at least a national perspective, the CDDs will be, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in the top 10, something like that. So that was sort of my forecast thinking for this period.
Let me see. Okay, I am on. Yeah, I agree with you on that. There was nothing that was outstanding when you look at the teleconnections versus MJO, and even ENSO analogs that put us in this position relative to last year's La Nina. Everything's pointing either at normal or and then when Joe was talking to me about where the models are doing, they're doing something different from what the analogs are doing. And so, yeah, I didn't deviate too far from the 10-year, I think. Is this today's forecasts here?
Yeah.
And let's see, where did we go? Oh, Joe's going to put it in a minute, but I think we're rolling with 49, which is right around the mean for the 10-year climatology. And since we see a lot of mixed signals from different things that we're using, we'll probably roll with a little bigger sigma than we've been doing. So.
Yeah, my forecast was pretty much the same thing, because I changed my formula down to 10% teleconnections, which I should have done a couple of weeks ago, because really the teleconnections these past few weeks have been kind of useless.
Yes, they have
Because
been.
just looking at the NAO, it's like, it's just a flat neutral except for one positive spike in June and one negative spike in May. It's been essentially neutral since basically, I'll say May 10th. That looks like AO isn't really a factor at this point anyway. Hasn't been, also heading towards neutral, and PNA a little bit more of a factor, but again, in summer months, the teleconnections don't really play that big of a role. I mean, I guess unless you had something like a minus or +2 or 2.5 deviation here, but overall the teleconnections haven't been really giving me much of a signal, so that's why I had decided to drop it down to 10% to make up for the other. I guess it went from 50 to 10, so to make up for the other 40%, I increased the CPC a little bit, and just kind of the rest went into my 10-year Euro blend, which is 30% of the Euro forecast, 70% of the 10-year forecast. So I upped that to 60%. So that's most of my forecast is that, with a little bit of an increase based on the CPC, which has a pretty broad warm pattern, very similar to the period we just had. So, but with the Texas cold a little bit pushed to the east, so might miss a little bit of Dallas, hit more of a Louisiana area, but Louisiana is still plenty populous, so that will also hit the CDD. Is probably not as hard, but overall, I think I'm the warmest forecast for humans, so we'll see if I end up being right this time, or or if someone else ends up being right somewhere on the excuse me, on the cooler side, like Matt Rogers or Josh Herman. Any questions for my forecast?
No, I mean, personally, I think my gut feeling says that, you know, you're more likely to be right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the warmer, as I mentioned. So I don't have any. Sure. And the only other thing I was going to add is, so far you're off to another good start. I took a look at the cooling season, and I think you're number one. I mean, we only have 3 forecasts so far, but I believe Michael so far is starting off in the summer where he left off in the winter, on top. So yeah,
But the directionally
That's
correct
good.
is.
yeah. Well, the directionally correct. Yeah, I don't think anyone who's submitted 3 forecasts is better than 2 out of 3. Yeah, so everyone, but from compared to the 30-year, compared to the consensus on the all the way on the right, I think you're number one. So, it's a good start to those first 3 forecasts. That's good.
Yeah, for what it's worth, if anyone wants to be let in on a little trade secret here, back when I was doing, and Dave knows this, so I'll give it a full explanation because I don't believe Dr. Lupo was ever on when I explained these.
Still accurate as far as I know.
I did a small research project to try to. This was, I guess, going on over a year ago now, right, Dave? Got to be over a year.
Yeah.
Where I was trying to see if I could bias correct the EC. And the best performer for that bias correction was taking 30% of the EC and 10%, not 10%, 70% of the 10-year, putting those two numbers together, and that was able to consistently outperform the EC over the course of a season. Of course, you can't outperform every time. For an entire HDD and CDD season, so basically a whole year, it was able to outperform the EC and by similar numbers. So I decided to kind of test that number out myself, and I've been kind of fiddling with it with my own ideas, adding in the CPC and the teleconnections kind of to balance it out, because it does struggle when it's colder, obviously, since the 10-year is always going to be so warm and the EC usually isn't that cold when it's cold. So it does struggle with, cooler forecasts. But overall, it did reasonably well, and I think that adds a lot to, especially in the cooling season, adds to my decent forecasts. I think anyway. I can't say for sure one way or the other, but yeah. So we'll take a look at a couple other forecasts here from some bigger names than I. Dr. Decker, of course, thinking it'll be a little cooler due to that Texas, Louisiana coolness from the CPC. Of course, no surprise there. I'm actually, I take that back a little bit. I'm a little surprised he went that cool. I guess that, because this is the interesting thing about the CPC forecast is you can have 2 people look at it, like me and Dr. Decker. Fortunately, he's not here to kind of explain it, but I took this as a warmer signal, and he actually took it as a cooler signal, at least than the 10-year, unless he's going with the 30-year, in which case then he took it as a warmer signal. But so I don't know, it's just an interesting tidbit on how people interpret this forecast, since we have 2 people that use it, or maybe even one more. I think I don't think Phil forecasted today, but I think he might use it as well. MJO analog seems to think 47. I think that's also an interesting tidbit, considering the MJO isn't really coherent right now with the signal. You'd probably have to dig into one of these probably to kind of see if there's some kind of competing signals, canceling each other out. But right now it looks like null phase for the MJO, so I guess that in itself can be a actually, since we have still 20 minutes, Dave, what's the name of the website for the MJO analog tool? That, I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about or not.
You could access it through research up in the navigation. Yeah, there it is.
Is this one? Okay. All right.
Click on CDDs.
CDDs. What day is today? I guess we'll do June 1st. Flag 16th, as soon as it loads. Yeah, so it looks like just pull this a little closer. Oh, this one. So yeah, it looks oops. Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like we're gonna be like null area of phase 1, phase 2, which is a warmer signal. I'm kind of surprised by that a little bit. You wouldn't normally expect, at least I wouldn't, expect there to be, any kind of warmer signal in the null phase, but I mean, there it is right there. Not very warm, but still definitely a warmer cluster in that area. It's not something that I would normally expect. I can move this.
Well,
Maybe we're a little closer to June 10th.
remember, null is sort of arbitrary here. I mean, it's and that's in part why we do diagrams like this, right? Like, I know that circle, I guess, represents, I don't know, 1 standard deviation, but just because you're 0.9 standard deviations or 1.1, I think this is where the value of plots like this, right? Instead of using arbitrary, hey, if it's greater than 1 or if it's greater than 2, this shows you what you mentioned, which is there seems, I'm doing a visual inspection, not like a hard statistical, but visually speaking, it does seem like there starts to become a relationship between, a warm signal even before you hit 1 standard deviation if you're in phases 1 and 2. So I think that's helpful information.
Yeah, because I mean, I know I don't think anyone else here really does this, but I know when I see the MJO in the null phase or within that circle, I usually kind of dismiss it as like, oh well, it's not really giving a signal, whatever. But I think this tool, you're right, I think is really helpful so that people can see like, hey, for the most part, yes, it is kind of null, or it doesn't really give a signal, I should say, not null, in certain regions, but in other regions like that phase 1-2 region, which does appear to be exceptionally warm throughout, which makes sense. But there is a warmer signal to be had even inside the circle. I think that's unfortunately I'm the only one that can learn that lesson, but one is better than none. So
Right.
we'll look at one more forecast here. We'll look at Matt Rogers. Seems to think a difficult forecast. I agree with that overall. Not very clear signals anywhere to be found. The MJO is slightly warm. The teleconnections are nowhere to be seen, and most people don't use the CPC as their forecast metric. So, attempt at MJO phase 8 and positive glam could lean the period cooler in the east. Not really what I want to hear, but so let's take a look and see what he's thinking. Close a few of these out. So yeah, cool East Coast, warmer West Coast into the mountain regions, central plains, and then normal for the rest. So I think that's, not I don't particularly like this forecast because I'm tired of it being cool in the summer. It was cool. Heck, it was I think it was like 50 degrees like a week or 2 ago here. I was like, I had to wear a jacket outside, my heavy winter jacket, and it was like June 1st. I was like, what is happening? But so I'm kind of tired of the cooler weather. Could use some sweltering heat, which it's not too bad today, but like to see some heat in the summer. But looks like he's expecting a cool East Coast with a warm West Coast. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, heat in the summer, that's easy for a younger, more skinny person to say. Us with a little padding. prefer that cooler weather.
I know. I agree. It's been terrible the last couple of days. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'll take. I want those 40s back.
Yeah, I had a teacher in my freshman year of college who would have his something called a yuck meter, where it's, I think the pinnacle was like 95 degrees with like a 75-degree dew point was like the pinnacle of his yuck meter.
Yeah.
Almost a typical July day out here.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't mind the heat too much as long as it's not stupid humid, but
yeah, that's that dew point. That's a real killer on comfort.
This, yeah, I was just thinking with this summer, again, it'll be interesting to see how it ends. It would be kind of fun if we had like a seasonal forecast, because I would be interested to see how folks would forecast this June, July, August kind of period or whatever. How much the influence how much folks are going to allow Texas to, influence their thinking, and ultimately how much will the early season, rainfall and soil moisture issues influence the CDD numbers. I'd be interested. Is it going to be one of these cases? I feel like there's been so many over the last 10, 15 years where you think there's an opportunity for the summer not to be that hot, and it finds a way. From a national CDD perspective, it finds a way to be in the top 5, top 7, top 8. Or, will the summer buck the trend like we've seen occasionally, 2014 and some other summers, where we can actually, if not get down to the 30-year normal, at least get somewhere between the 10 and 30-year normal and have something of a more, closer to normal kind of summer. I think I'm intrigued. I feel like, just to finish that thought, I feel like, yeah, I mean, well, you already know what my gut feeling is in terms of probably going warm, but I'm also interested to see. I mean, it would be nice to see an actual cool summer from meteorological. I know, Michael, you'd like to see a hot summer just from your personal benefit, but just to see if we can actually get a cool summer without there being a ridiculously strong El Nino or some other obvious indicator, or I shouldn't say obvious, but maybe some other, maybe large scale driver forcing it.
yeah, I mean, I think it's also, I know it's early into the into the season, but we're already getting, it's not by much, but the EC is already forecasting over the 10-year. I don't know if I think this is the new 10-year, right?
It is.
Yeah.
The is wrong, but it is.
So we're already passing the new 10-year, which I think we just did, and the new 30-year is still way down there. So it just keeps on getting warmer. I wouldn't mind seeing the trend also get bucked and start having some cooler summers overall. But doesn't, looking at it already, it doesn't seem as though that would be the case. And this isn't really the best way to look at it, but 10 years doing pretty well, so that says something, I think.
Yeah. The only I'm just only because we have a couple extra minutes. My best 2 cents would be, if we look back at this summer, and this is partially just based on experience, partially some research, but nothing hard here. Nothing. Don't bet your paycheck on it. But if we look back and see cold summer, I think maybe I would expect, my best guess would be that we're going to look back and see that on those MJO phase diagrams, a lot more phase 6, 7, or kind of 5, 6, 7, and maybe some typhoon activity and stuff like that, some sort of feedback mechanism that builds a certain pattern, and then you have some help from Texas. That being said, I don't expect that. I mean, I don't think that's the center line, as we've talked about, but that would be my guess in terms of if we look back and say, hey, what the hell, it was kind of a cool summer, something like that, some of the data that I've seen suggests that if you can get, whether it's ENSO induced or not ENSO induced, just, stochastic processes, whatever. But if you can just get the, more of a convective signal out in the Western Central Pacific, maybe some feedback from typhoons, give it, chicken egg, I don't know, but that maybe that would create that ridge trough pattern and lock things in. But, just speculated. So anyone else have any last thoughts before we go?
I mean, as for the summer overall, I mean, I haven't looked at anything, but usually the first, at least for this area, the first month or so of summer is not the best indicator of what the rest of the summer is going to be like. I remember, I think the past couple of years, actually, this has been this way where, up through May 15th, give or take a couple of weeks, that summer, or not summer, I guess, but the temperatures are usually like, it's kind of miserable, in the 50s, kind of humid, cloudy and foggy overall, just kind of miserable late spring weather. And then kind of a flip just gets switched, and all of a sudden you're in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of what happened this year again, with a little bit of a delayed reaction, considering it was so cool into late May, at least at that one period. So I don't know if that will continue to be the case, but right now I'm thinking it's going to end up being a warmer summer. I know, a shocking, bold forecast, but but I think, in spite of Texas, even though, it's not necessarily a given that Texas is going to be cool the whole summer, but, even if it is, I think there's more than enough warmth in California. There, especially in the drought conditions, that usually makes things a little bit warmer. I think has the, if I'm not mistaken, and they're not expected to come out of that anytime soon, from what I've heard. I think I forget what phase the PDO is in for that, but I think it's in the wrong phase for rain for them. So California should help to offset a lot of the Texas and overall southern coolness in that area. Also appears that, the northern tier of the country, the Minnesota and Dakota area appears to be very warm. So it appears to be very warm for this period. Actually, it's the next 5-day period, but still seems to be very warm overall, especially on the East Coast as well. A lot of warmth there, at least in this current period. We'll see. So other than the occasional blip where, something, we get an unlucky period, and Chicago, New York, and Philly are all happen to be below average that week because we all got unlucky. I think overall we'll see forecasts being somewhere +5 to 10 of the 30-year on average, which probably ends up being the 10-year, but, I think it'll be even warmer than the 10-year, but I don't want to go that far. All right. Any closing thoughts? Maybe someone has baseball they want to talk about. All right. So I think that's it, and can let everyone go a little bit early today. And hope everyone has a good week, and etc. Maybe go and grill a hot dog or something if the weather isn't too obliteratingly humid outside.
No, my weekend is gonna consist of watching my wallet empty as I marry off my second daughter. So
Well, congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
congratulations.
yeah.
thank you.
Not about the wallet thing.
Yeah, I feel your pain on that, but all right. Well, take care, guys.
All right. Have a good week.
All right, bye.
Bye.